A mysterious man named Adler came to Vienna to prove himself in front of the goddess of fate in order to become a brave. He interrupted the semi-final match between two warriors in the holy tournament that chooses braves, proclaiming to be the strongest man in the world. The royal guards tried to stop Adler, but he took them out. Afterwards, he fought two warriors and incapacitated them both before being captured by more guards and thrown into jail. While in jail, a maid sneaked inside to meet Adler. She was impressed by his fight and asked him about his fighting style, philosophy, and his goal to become one of the 6 flowers of the brave. Adler replied that he believed he'd become a brave, one of the 6 chosen warriors to fight the demon god, and that he wishes to fight alongside Princess Nashitania if she were to be chosen as a brave. He's then moved to an isolated prison cell in a pit. For many days and nights, Adler remained in the dark pit with barely any food or water. Some weeks later, the braves were chosen, and Adler received the crest of the 6 flowers on his right hand. The maid arrived, revealed to be the Princess Nashitania, much to Adler's surprise. She rescued him from his cell. Nashitania showed him her own crest just below her collarbone on her chest. She freed him from his sound at the expense of her own soldiers, trapping them in the same pit that they had thrown Adler in. They both fled from Vienna and began heading west on horseback towards the land of the howling demons to meet the other braves and defeat the demon god. For several days, Adler and Nashitania got to know each other through talk and play. Though there was a small incident when Nashitania got too serious in her play and nearly skewered him with her swords. Upon rebuking her, Adler found out about her mischievous nature, and she pretended to be saddened and scared of his anger towards her. He was also able to see how her abilities worked and her free-spiritedness, which exasperated him. Nonetheless, they began to grow closer. But when a village in their path was attacked by Kioma, Adler and Nashitania rushed to their defense and were able to fight together briefly. However, as they were escorting villagers away, Adler learned of a single girl who had stayed behind. Nashitania implored Adler that their mission to defeat the demon god was more important than helping one girl and being possibly killed by a Kioma. Before then unable to do so, Adler went on ahead of her, leaving Nashitania to defend the villagers against any remaining Gyarma. Upon reaching the village, Adler was surprised to find a number of Gyarma corpses and a board of iron as the only evidence. Then he found a girl with white hair and black clothing helping a dog and its young pup, setting them free. Framey tells Adler to leave her alone, stating that she must fight the margin by herself. However, Adler chases her until she's forced to travel together with him. He sends a message to Nashitania with his horse, telling her he found another of the 6 braves and to continue towards the peninsula where the margin is without him. Adler and Framey eventually run into a fortress where soldiers explain to them about a barrier that should help the braves in a nearby temple. As Adler and Framey continue to travel, they're suddenly attacked by Nashitania and Goldoff. With Nashitania warning Adler to stay away from Framey, as Framey and Nashitania fight from a distance, Goldoff charges at the former. Adler tries to stop him, but Goldoff pushes him aside, trying to end the fight. Adler shouts to them all to stop and says that Framey is not their enemy since she's also one of the braves. Nashitania and Goldoff are surprised and inform Adler that Framey is the brave killer. Framey doesn't deny and confirms that she is indeed the killer. She then names some of her victims. She then says that Goldoff and Nashitania are also her targets while aiming her gun at them. Adler asks if Leona was also her target, but Framey answers that she was but that she didn't know what happened to her. Adler then asks her why she killed all the potential braves, and Framey replies that the margin could return if only weak warriors remain to be chosen as braves. Goldoff and Nashitania are now convinced she is their enemy and are about to kill Framey when Adler blocks them. He refuses to believe that someone trying to revive the margin would be chosen as a brave and says that he'll side with Framey if he has to fight. Nashitania finally decides to agree with Adler and tells Goldoff that they'll stop fighting. She then informs Framey that she still doesn't believe her and that she only trusts Adler. As the group heads for Mora, they notice several flying Kioma heading for the temple. The braves rush to the temple but are blocked by a different group of Gyama. As they battle, Nashitania instructs Adler to go ahead to the temple. When Adler reaches the temple, he notices an injured priestess. He turns to help her, but she tells him to hurry inside. Adler tries to open the door, but it doesn't open, so he blasts it open with some explosives. Immediately afterwards, 2 armored soldiers exit from the inside and attack Adler, who is surprised. Adler tries to ask the priestess what happened, but she's actually a shape-shifting Kioma who escapes after defeating the soldiers who turn out to be just suits of armor. Adler feels a cold sense of dread before entering the temple. He notices mist appearing from the ground, fearing someone had already activated the barrier. Adler then enters the activation chamber only to discover that his fear had come true when he notices the sword already in the pedestal. He looks around the room but doesn't find anyone else inside. Nashitania, Framey, and Goldoff arrive, and Nashitania asks Adler why he activated the barrier. Adler insists it wasn't him and that someone else activated it and then disappeared. While the group tries to figure out what's happened, Goldoff decides to turn off the barrier and removes the sword. But Framey says that the fog's still there. Adler tries to turn it off by cutting his hand, dripping his blood on the pedestal, and reciting barrier release, but nothing changes. Nashitania then panics, grabbing the sword and attacking the pedestal, shouting barrier release and that she was the owner of the barrier while breaking the slab. Framey stops her, telling her that there's no point in panicking. When they hear footsteps, Kiamo arrives and asks what happened when she recognizes the members of the group, except for Adler. Others ask her who she is, and Kiamo introduces herself and announces that she was also chosen as a brave. Kiamo then decides that they should start killing Framey, who also prepares for a fight. But Adler and Nashitania stop them. Mora arrives, wondering what the group is arguing over. When she realizes Wakiyama was about to start a fight, Mora then orders Kiamo to stop and tells the group that there's an outsider amongst them. When she reveals that she'd been traveling with a man she met the day before, Hans, who's also a brave, Adler orders everyone to show their crest, and they realize there are 7 of them. Mora tells the group the story of the saint of the single flower who split her power into 6 for each of the braves so that it was impossible for there to be more or less than 6 braves. Adler and Hans went outside to find an escape from the barrier, but unfortunately, they went in circles. When they were back, they saw Framey cuffed and tied as the initial 7th brave and the prime suspect of the activation of the barrier. Mora then suggested introducing themselves in order to gather more information about each other. During Framey's introduction, she revealed herself as a half-human, half-Kioma entity born from a human father and a Kioma mother. Adler then explains his side of the story, but Hans saw a flaw in it, like those locked room mysteries, therefore making him the prime suspect. Adler, in his confusion and anxiety, took Framey as his hostage, poisoned her to keep her unconscious, and escaped the temple. But Hans managed to throw a dagger at him, slowing him down. He then passed out due to the blood loss while escaping. While he was down, he remembered how he went to his master, Arthrospica, and begged to take him as a student. His first lesson was to smile in despair. As he regained consciousness, he noticed that he had bandages, and Framey patched him up. They both talked about their past, and as they opened up to each other, he then speculated that there might be an 8th brave who helped the 7th, and he needed to find that out to prove his innocence. Arthur told Framey about his past, on how he was taught to fight and even learn science by Arthrospiker, his master. He also talked about a lizard-like humanoid Kioma who had 3 wings, who went to their village when he was young. Framey then confirmed that it was the same Kioma who convinced her mother to give birth to her. Framey then told her story, that her mother had pretended to love her and then tried to kill her after Framey disappointed her, making her furious of her kind and wanting to kill the Margin out of revenge. They then parted ways, and Framey headed back to the others inside the temple. The Braves devised a plan to capture and kill Adler. As they split into groups to search for Adler, he went to the temple where he was attacked by Hans. Adler was able to escape but then engaged in a battle with Hans in the forest. Adler is trying to convince Hans somehow that he's not the 7th, but Hans still suspects him. As Adler tries to trick Hans, he didn't kill him when he had the chance to prove that he's not the imposter. Hans then told Adler that he's the 7th brave, slicing his throat open. Adler then realized that it was a hallucination, and Hans decided to believe in him as he saw his dying reaction, which would be different had he been an imposter. Meanwhile, Nashitania speculated that Hans might be the 7th brave and is asking Goldoff for help and to trust that Adler is innocent. Adler and Hans went back to the temple to find clues, but Kiamo was outside and decided that she was bored of waiting, so she would just kill everyone to see if they were the traitor, attacking both of them by summoning her Jumma. Adler and Hans battled Kiamo, but her fiends would always regenerate, making them hard to incapacitate. Then they thought of incapacitating Kiamo to stop the fiends. It was a success, and they captured Kiamo. They asked her if she knew anything about the activation of the barrier, and she nodded no. Adler went to search for more clues and used the bomb that Framey gave to give a signal to her. Framey noticed and met each other. Adler hypothesized about a saint's involvement in the matter and their possible uses, but Framey rebuked them. Back at the temple, Hans told Mora and Kiamo the same thing, but Mora refused to believe them. Meanwhile, Nashitania confirms with Goldoff if someone died by checking her crest. Adler tells Framey his hypothesis about the seventh and then confesses he loves her, but it made her more doubtful, thinking the other is trying to deceive her. Hans told Mora and Kiamo the same hypothesis, which made Mora call for Nashitania and Goldoff. Using her powers, she told them that Hans was severely injured by Adler, making Nashitania snap and furious to have trusted and defended him. Framey pursued the escaping Adler and made a signal to the others of their location. Mora caught up, and the three engaged in a battle, but then Adler surrendered and convinced Mora about Framey's innocence so the others wouldn't suspect her if he dies. Mora tried to kill Adler, but Framey decided to believe Adler and stopped Mora. Adler and Framey then escaped but were cornered by Nashitania and Goldoff, who were also out to kill Adler because of Mora's lie. Adler and Framey were cornered by Mora, Nashitania, and Goldoff. Adler started running back to the temple to meet with Hans while Framey backed him up. But Mora and Goldoff stopped Framey, and Nashitania pursued and incapacitated Adler. In the process, he felt the chills as Nashitania gave the final blow and blocked her weapon using his hands and kicked her to escape. Goldoff followed him until they went back to the place where they fought the Kiomars near the temple. As Goldoff, Nashitania, Mora, and the captured Framey got back together, Nashitania was shocked to see Kiamo with Hans alive and well, realizing Mora had fooled them. Nashitania, Framey, and Goldoff are cornered by Mora, Nashitania, and Goldoff. Nashitania starts running back to the temple to meet with Hans while Framey backs her up. But Mora and Goldoff stop Framey, and Nashitania pursues and incapacitates Adler. In the process, he feels the chills as Nashitania gives the final blow and blocks her weapon using his hands and kicks her to escape. Goldoff follows him until they go back to the place where they fought the Kiomars near the temple. As Goldoff, Nashitania, Mora, and the captured Framey get back together, Nashitania is shocked to see Kiamo with Hans alive and well, realizing Mora had fooled them. Arthur confirms that Mora might have been the seventh brave if his deductions were correct, but Gyama rebukes his conclusion. She and Hans were able to find copies of the tablet and tools that might have been used for the real activation of the barrier. On the second tablet were instructions to reactivate the fog barrier, which was by removing the knife and shattered tablet, dripping blood all over the stand, saying the words, and breaking the tablet. This makes everyone think, and Kiomars could live together in peace, but around 500,000 humans might die in the process. Adler then orders everyone to kill her, but she escapes. He fainted due to the loss of blood. As he regains consciousness, Mora apologizes to him for thinking he was the seventh and trying to kill him. She also takes care of his wounds. After resting, they all go outside to continue their travel to fight the Margin. But to their surprise, they meet Rulonia, Adler's childhood friend and the Saint of Blood, who describes the channel and asks